you, everyone. That's really helpful. Thanks, everyone, for being so open. What we have next, because why not, is we're going to do live polls across the session. You'll have to do it only 3 times. This is the bit that I was saying I'm slightly nervous about, making sure it works. Good thing I remembered to make sure it's on the right slide. Why do we do these polls? We've been doing them across all of our other roundtables across the globe. It reveals collective thinking in real time, which is always exciting to see. It allows us to do some comparative analysis between, well, what are the responses like in Singapore versus Chicago, for example, and how's that different? And it ensures, for those of us who are not necessarily as vocal as the rest of us, to make sure that you're contributing to the collective thinking. How it works is very, very straightforward. Any of you who've lived through the COVID times, particularly in Singapore, know how to scan QR codes, or even after. So there will be a QR code that you need to scan, but it's not traced together, thankfully. There will be a question, hopefully the right question, up on the slide when, as is on the actual app. It's called Mentimeter, for those of you who might have used it in the past. You have to select one response, scroll down, click submit. That's all we got to do. So it's like short, sharp, 25, 30 seconds per question. Any questions on the process or instructions? All right, let's get into the first one. And before we do, there are, as I said, 3 polls throughout the session. Our recommendation is not to close the tab, but if accidentally you do, there will be a QR code every time there is a live polling question, so you can rescan and open it up. Does anyone need access to Wi-Fi? Tough luck, because I don't know the password. But anyway, we'll move on. Okay, so please scan, and someone from Cielo team, please tell me it's working, and you see the same question up in your browsers.
Yes, okay.
Working? Super.
Okay.
Right, the results coming up. I'm going to give it a few more seconds. For those of you who are not using Singtel connections and have low speed in internet, yes, Lance, shout out. All done? Anyone still having a go? Okay. Wow, this is quite evenly split. So the question was, which of these workforce transformation challenges is most pressing for your organization in 2025? Pick one. And the top response is organizational agility and flexibility with 30% of you. The next is workforce planning in volatile times with 26%. A close third is the first one, skills gaps in existing workforce. And then 17% balancing automation with human-centered work. And the last one with 4% is AI integration and adoption. Really, really interesting responses. Anyone have any thoughts? Shocked? Surprised?
The opposite, I think, last.
It's the opposite from last year. Great observation. And I think what it also shows is it's frankly a lot more evenly spread than we had initially thought it would be. We were expecting a couple of these suspects to get more votes than others. But really interesting. And thank you very much for your participation. Now, without further ado, I would like to move to the next session. I'm not going to give too much away. We're all really excited about this. But can we please have on stage D N Prasad and Marissa Geist?
Interesting poll responses for sure, Sid. I also think the option that got a 30% vote is a good catch-all. Everything else falls under the gamut of agility and organizational design. So the smart question there as well. Hi, Marissa.
Hello, Dan Free. I just want to say a huge thank you and welcome for coming to this fireside chat today. And so we'll talk a little bit between the two of us just on some topics that we've prepped, but we want to make it interactive at the end, just like Sid said. So if you hear something that catches your ear, write a note down. We also want to know where you disagree with what we say, because sometimes the dissonance is where we get the best information. I also would encourage you, as you all usually do, to think about the reality versus the theory. Because I think a lot of times we're hearing a lot of information and it sounds like everybody else is doing something that we're not doing, or it's a big topic of discussion. But then when it comes to application, is it really happening, or is it just something that's a buzzword? So a lot of what we're talking about today is a lot of your life's work of keeping Singapore at the forefront of talent and having talent be the competitive advantage of Singapore. So we're going to talk about your role in making sure that happens, the government's role in making sure that happens, private corporation, and also the individual. So just encourage you to think about how this actually shows up versus kind of the theory of what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
So shall we get started?
Ready when you are?
Okay. All right. So the first concept I want to talk about or get your thoughts on, when McKinsey did a poll of how people are thinking about their own individual reskilling. And we know that your work with the Singapore government had a lot to do with reskilling in Singapore. When they interviewed CEOs of global corporations, they stacked ranked whose responsibility it was for developing skills. The CEO said number one was the corporations, and number two was the individual. And somewhere around 4 or 5 was the government. And then they surveyed individuals, and the individuals said number one was the individual, number two was the company, and 4 or 5 was the government. Universities and some skilled trades organizations were there. But it's really interesting that, we tend to say, where's the government assistance, or, what are the programs that will help skilling, where that's not the top in corporations' mind, it's not the top in individuals' mind. But it is interesting how the corporations we're holding ourselves accountable to make sure our teams have what they need. But the individuals are saying, nope, I need to be able to own my learning. So I wanted to get your thoughts and maybe a little background on how the work with the government you did really informed. How did you think, and how does the Singapore government think about its responsibility for making sure that the talent in this market is the best talent in the world?
That's a great start to this chat, Marissa. Thanks for asking. Before I get into some of the specifics of what makes Singapore very unique, and I am preaching to the choir here. There are a lot of you who either made Singapore home for many years or are originally from Singapore. So, again, as I said, we're saying there is collective wisdom in the room that is greater than the two of us sitting on this side of the chair. So we'll have the conversation around that as well. And there's when I spent about 12 years in Google, we always had this strong belief that careers are absolutely driven by personal drivers, and it's an individual. So we would often say that if we need to look at career development, if we need to look at reskilling as one of the tools for career development and put a number to it, 51% is always with the individual, 49% is with the organization and the ecosystem. Over the years in Google as well, and now more recently, my 5.5 years with GovTech, where I had a bit of a vantage position to look at how Singapore government works too with regards to this. And I've extended it to my views around AI. I'm just digressing slightly to kind of lay the foundation. I strongly believe now that it's all an ecosystem play. It's not just one player or the other, but it's the entire ecosystem coming together. We'll take AI, for example. The government has to come in and be responsible for the governance, the ethical practices, and then, how is it managed? There is industry that comes in with both the development and implementation of the technology, but also in terms of educating the users, etc., the best use cases and what have you. There's academia that comes in to help people reskill and upskill and develop curriculum around it, but they also are responsible for awareness for individuals. But the most important for me is also going back to the individuals here, the users who need to be responsible in and by themselves for responsible usage of AI. So if I kind of draw parallels to that with skilling and with how talent needs to be developed, I see something very similar happen. Again, depending on which side of the table one is sitting in and what frame of mind you're in, the ratios could change. And then again, in Singapore, a lot of people do hold government responsible because that's how the government has taken care of, over a period of time. Now, there are a few things that becomes very unique to Singapore. The first one is our journey from a small island nation with limited natural resources to the economic global superpower that we are today has been largely driven by a singular focus on the most valuable asset of Singapore, which is people. And even here, the ecosystem play comes into play. I think the core talent infrastructure here is driven by or anchored on the tripartite model, where the government, the employers, and the employee unions come together to form solutions. In fact, I made a note here that the framework almost acts as a thermostat. So whenever there is a slight imbalance, the three groups come together to and provide solutions for it. And we've seen that happen during one of our more recent challenges during COVID as well. So where everybody came in together to start providing the job support scheme for the Singaporeans who are out of jobs, etc. So that's been a constant approach in Singapore. The second one, of course, it's not come without its challenges. I think a rather academic focused education rigor that we see in most of the Asian companies, Singapore included, has also resulted in a bit of a paper chase culture. And you and I were talking about it the last time. That there is a lot of focus on skilling, and we also see individuals kind of focusing on stacking up their certifications. So, and now there's a huge shift in terms of how can we make that implementable? How can we make that adaptive to the workplace and the work that we do? So that's been another focus.
We did talk about that, how people are now taking on that skilling challenge themselves, and how do we think about that? Are they doing it on company time? Are they doing it on their own time? Is it worth it? Are you advising it's a good idea to do it in this time when in Singapore the job market is more challenged than it has been, but in some other countries in the U.S., most college or half of college grads cannot find a job within 10 months of graduation. In India, half of the individuals with graduate degrees are unemployed. So when we think about that, there's plentiful amounts of really educated people, but not enough jobs right now, is encouraging your teams to go stack up a whole bunch of certificates really the best path forward? Is it some other more integrated way to learn? So I think right now, kind of traditional wisdom of go get another degree, go get more skilling, go get a certificate. That was how you ensured job security and job placement. We're not in that market. We're not in that market anymore. So what's the advice you're giving to your teams? We'll get to this in the Q&A. What would you give to your children? I have a 22-year-old son who's going to college, and he's saying, "Mom, what should I do?" I love it that he still thinks I have the answers to some of these questions, but I don't. So I'm hoping your smart minds can help get some insight. So when we think about that, it's what should we be encouraging and what should we be advocating for as corporate leaders to say, here's what's best for the workforce, and let's not paper chase in terms of the support we're getting from the government or from the universities. What are the things we really need to make sure our workforce is still compelling and still engaged? Yes.
So there are a couple of things. I mean, like I mentioned, there's a huge focus on moving away from just getting certifications to how do you bring it to the workplace and in your role. Even if I look at I'll share a couple of examples. The skills future credits that we started here. Anyone over 25 will get credits to go and continuously uplearn. So the very concept of lifelong learning, like you mentioned earlier as well, has now been the cornerstone of how Singapore is approaching developing the talent. The second one is there's also a lot of focus, and again, thanks to what we experienced during COVID, and this is particularly led by Workforce Singapore, a lot of mid-career conversion programs that are happening as well. And then, this is a whole, it's not just initiatives, if you ask me, these are movements, and then very significantly different from how the culture had been earlier. So that shift is something that's very significant in my view. And that's exactly what we're telling our employees as well. In fact, in GovTech, we used to say that we are not, despite being a government agency, we went out for the first time possibly to say we are not guaranteeing lifetime employment, but we are invested in your lifetime employability.
I think that's a big shift from what people had certainly experienced 10 or 15 years ago. I think now what we're worried about, and a lot of our clients are worried about, some of you in this room as well, we've had record low turnover globally in most of our clients. Voluntary turnover is so low. It's called job hoarding now, if you haven't heard that. Job hoarding, we're hoarding the jobs. And what that means is people are staying in jobs that maybe they don't want or don't desire to be in when there's new opportunity to change roles. So it seems almost absurd to talk about now about retention in a market where no one is leaving the jobs they're in, but we know, like everything, it's a moment. So how are we talking to we're not promising job retention forever in some cases. A lot of cases, people are making tough decisions. Having that we're invested in your employability. Is that shooting yourself in the foot? If you're making people so employable that as soon as there's choice, then we go back to the 2021 moment of the Great Resignation. I think these are things that we don't know because we don't know how people feel towards corporations. We don't know how they feel towards the career, particularly Gen Alpha, Gen Z, and some of the earlier millennials. I think the elder millennials we've seen a track record with. But what does that mean in terms of how much are you pushing this? Is that something that's getting people ready to say, okay, they're not even promising anything and they're training me. I'm going to be super employable when the market turns again. So how do we feel about that? What do we want to do about it?
At least the way we looked at it, I think we enjoyed a single-digit attrition during COVID when the market had just gone completely berserk. We did 15% or so. That was the highest, but we pegged it back to a single-digit later. Now, the skilling or the investment in somebody's development also comes along with multiple other factors in the organization. How's your culture? What's the manager capability? How's leadership? What's the vision? And like I mentioned earlier, the personal purpose that I always had at GovTech was that I was playing my part in nation building. It can't get better than that. It can't get more purposeful than that. So how do you build the vision for them? How do you show what they are responsible for? A lot of those factors. So if you're confident in your skin, if the organization is doing really well across multiple dimensions, I don't believe we need to fear about developing our people to be able to scale up and level up and evolve over time because it's going to help the organization. Worst case, you can't stop attrition. It's a natural phenomena. In fact, some attrition is good for the organizations, that you're also enriching the ecosystem. And that's a slightly public service angle, a government angle, but I would believe that the private sector should have the same view, and we do. In fact, that was something that we did in Google as well. It's okay because we are enriching the ecosystem, and if we are good enough, they will come back.
I think that's proven out in life. If you try to hold on to something too hard by threatening it, usually doesn't work out for any party involved. You mentioned vision and culture, and we've talked a lot about that, how you really advocate for creating psychological safety at work and a natural curiosity and learning. I'm going to pull it into the buzzword that Sid banned from saying, but AI, now it's not about the technology, it's about how does that change the work we're doing. And Singapore is such an exemplary market for the employability and the competitiveness of this workforce. You're consistently rated in the top 5, if not the top 10 by the IMD for worker quality, worker engagement, opportunity. But as we see with AI, there's actually a pretty big gender gap in adoption. Harvard Business Review just published a global study that said, regardless of where you are in the world, regardless of what sector you're in, what region you're in, and what type of work you do, men are adopting technology much more quickly than women. And that has some unintended consequences as we have a world where people are either going to have robots that work for them or they will work for robots. And we might be going into a very, very inequitable future if we don't think about it differently. And I know you talk a lot about making sure that AI feels safe, accessible, and learning. So maybe your thoughts on, obviously, Google would probably wrestle with some of those technology questions, even though it wasn't called Gen AI. And at the government level, how are you thinking about making sure that everyone comes on the journey, not just the folks that are excited about it?
Absolutely. For the uninitiated, again, Sid made a mention about scanning QR codes, which all of us became a bit of experts during COVID. And if you did develop that expertise, you can thank GovTech for it because Safe Entry was our product. And Trace Together was our product. Jokes apart, we were responsible for digitalizing the entire Singapore government. So digital government.
That's amazing, except for menus at restaurants, which I still would like a picture.
Yes, yeah. And I've moved from carrying papers to iPad. That's about my technology evolution.
We're the gender study right up here.
And this was not planned to prove a point that Marissa just made. So the way I would look at it, a couple of things. One, when we did our digital maturity index study, we realized that not every agency, and we have 18 ministry families, 100 odd agencies, not every agency was in the uh, same quadrant of the maturity curve. We know that there are few people ahead of the curve, there are few people really behind the curve. At one of the ethics of the public service has always been that it has to be the principle of no man, no person left behind. And thereby comes the challenge. So how do we make sure that people who are ahead of the curve are not losing the momentum and they continue their progress, but we are also bringing along people who are behind the curve? And it had to be bespoke in our solutioning approach. And that's exactly what I believe we should be doing with AI as well. I think there are a lot of organizations where there's a lot of talk at this point in time, a lot of people as well, there's a lot of talk. It's almost the FOMO, fear of missing out, and therefore I need to be doing. But if you really ask them what they're doing, they might not be doing anything beyond a chatbot.
That's actually one of the discussion questions, I think, after we...
Oh, is it right?
I think we should definitely say what's actually happening,
Yes.
because we've seen everybody talking about it, but when you peel back the onion, see under the covers, not a lot of people doing a lot with it.
Absolutely. And their adoption has been good, but I think it is important to look at the organizational readiness for the adoption, not go tech for the sake of tech. It's about, and again, there's a McKinsey research that came out a few years ago where they talked about 70% of the digital transformation failures that happened because people were not brought along the journey. So that's going to be super critical for us as well. So a simple philosophy that we followed in GovTech was we need to think big and we need to start small and act fast. So that would be something that I would leave everything with. But please check the readiness of the organization, the people, before we decide how much do we want to push forward.
It's really interesting with our partners, some of you in the room, but even more interesting with some of the new prospects that are asking, should I partner with Cielo, should I not? Everyone wants to know what our AI strategy is, but mostly they say, but don't use it right now. I want to know that we could use it, but we're on a journey and we're not ready to adopt everything that you have right now, but you have to be able to know that if you want to turn it on, you can turn it on. We're still seeing humans are not only just in the loop, they are the loop. And the last mile service, in our industry, a recruiter makes sure the outcomes happen. And you can have all the technology in the world, but if you don't have somebody making sure it happens, it's still, we're not in a future where, I don't have my Back to the Future flying car yet. We're not there. So it's this very interesting moment of everyone's in a very different spot of there's an appetite. You have to probably tell someone you have AI readiness in whatever you're doing, but the practical application just isn't there yet. So that human centricity, I think, it seems almost paradoxical, but it's so critical right now.
Absolutely. I would always look at AI as an enabler and something that would augment the bandwidth of individuals or people in the team rather than something that would come and displace people. Yeah, there is a lot of fear. I think there's substantial work that has happened in the last couple of years, but more to be done about dispelling some of the fears that's out there about AI, that AI is going to come away and take all our jobs. Not really the case. I think if you look at it, really, people who are training themselves, upskilling themselves in being able to use technology, and in this case AI, would possibly replace people who are not investing in themselves. And that happens even today. Someone who is better qualified is replacing somebody who is less qualified. So there are certain aspects of the role that's going away, but then how can we use that to augment our bandwidth to go higher up the value chain? And there are a lot of examples of that happening very well as well.
Yes. There was a quote by an AI prompt engineer that said, they were a former coder, and they said, 90% of my job is going away, but the 10% that's left is 100x as important as it was 5 years ago. So we think about that and creating a culture of trust and skilling. It's not about what AI is going to take away your job or, what the work is, but really having people think critically about what part of your job likely won't go away and how do you get really good at that part of your job. And I think also in this whole idea of the system, the ecosystem, we're not going to tell our organizations, here's exactly what AI is going to do. People are going to use AI. I think about, the native users. I also have an 11-year-old, and he is a digital native. And the way he uses AI, I use AI like my grandparents used email, like a text, but very long and formal. And And he uses AI for things that I would never, and the way he uses it isn't to make the way I would do things a little bit better. It's a totally different application. So I think that that learning agility of how do we empower people to experiment responsibly, but they're going to teach us, the people that are closest to the work have always known more about the work than we do. And how do we make sure that we create a system that lets them experiment and show us this is the work that's going to be left, and this is what the talent that needs to operate this type of work looks like. So then we can build, what did you say in the beginning? Think big, but act small quickly.
Start small, act fast.
Think big, start small, act fast. Yes. We should put on a t-shirt.
I think we did. And got together. It was one of the t-shirts that we had. I really like philosophy behind it, so it's very powerful. And then the other question that I always ask about anything tech, and it could be Gen AI today, it could be agentic tomorrow, whatever. Is tech controlling us, or are we controlling tech? So long as we are in the latter camp, we are, I think, still good. But if we let tech start controlling us, I think there is something to worry about there.
Definitely. I think, so for the business leaders in the room too, when we think about how are you having this conversation with your company? I think skilling, reskilling, skills-based hiring, it's a bit of a buzzword right now in terms of what are we doing. We have some discrete efforts that are sort of transactional, but not, I mean, our systems aren't set up to do it. Our governments aren't set up to do it. If you imagine saying, I'm not going to post a job description for this job. I just want to put out there that I'm looking for people with these skills. Nothing is set up to be able to digest the work that way. So this is a fast, it'll be like an overnight success where it takes, 10 years to build the infrastructure to think differently. And then all of a sudden it'll be the way that we do things, but doesn't feel like we're there right now. So I guess with your work in terms of skilling, taking it to an ecosystem versus a transaction, what are some of the most important things that you think this room needs to be thinking about?
There are a couple of examples that I'll share from the work that's happening at the broader public service and also what we did at GovTech. So in the public service, there's a concept of functional leaders. So for example, GovTech was the functional leader for information science and smart systems. Similarly, public service division is the functional leader for HR. Accountant General's Directorate Office is the functional leader for finance and procurement, and so on and so forth. So each of these designated functional leaders were responsible for developing the skills framework and the competency framework for the profession. So GovTech is an example. We were a 4,500 strong organization, but we were responsible for anybody in IT across the government, which was close to about 12,000 people. So once we develop that, it's in a way we become their managers of sorts. So we are responsible for their development. So what we did therefore was also to set up something called a digital academy, which was one of my first responsibilities, which was basically to level up digital quotient in public service. And then if I look at the overall public service, we have Civil Service College, which is the center of a learning hub for all of public service. But we have something like 28 different institutes which focuses on different vocations or different domains. So there's a lot of investment. I think the first, going back to thinking big, starting small, the skill-based hiring or skill-based promotions, etc., might come in later, but we at least wanted to level up people and start skilling them or reskilling them. And that was the first big step. And then anything that we do is 145,000 public service, so it will take a while. Now, where, again, going back to what I mentioned about the digital journey, similarly in the skill-based or the competency-based journey, organizations that were ahead of the curve were given the free hand to go ahead. And so in GovTech, for example, we had implemented skills or competencies into the entire people supply chain, from hiring all the way to rewards and recognition. So that's really how we want to take that forward.
I think Singapore has an interesting advantage or opportunity for advantage where the leaders in this room represent some of the most important companies in the world, but certainly to Singapore as well. And just like I have a gentleman on my team who talks to me all the time about AI, and I understand probably, I'm going to go with 25% of what he's talking about. But one of the things that we said is, every organization doesn't build their own large language model. We are waiting for the large language models to be built. I think the parallel to this is, are you all building your own skills taxonomy? Are you all individually coming up with the way of working that will never scale, it won't take off because there's not enough commonality? And is there an opportunity for a workforce that is as united as Singapore in terms of the skills support we get, the language, something where you can really be ahead of the market, because it is such it's such a more well orchestrated development to say, okay, if I say, and you all know this, anytime you take over a system, a technology where it's like every job rec has a slightly different way of saying something, or every field and every technology is like rec posted, requisition posted, requisitions, someone miskeyed something, posted or poster. And instead of saying this is the way we're going to do it across the industry, we all try to design our own. And I think here it's just really interesting to think about if there's a skills taxonomy that exists in Singapore, that's light years ahead of other communities, because you can leverage a way of working in a common language. So that's I think the GovTech work that you did to actually put the whole supply chain down and create some commonality. Is that leverageable if you wanted to get more of a community of business leaders together to do that?
Absolutely. And it's always been symbiotic. In a sense, we had to develop our own. I mean, there was a skills taxonomy that we could have borrowed from Skills Future, which is very much there. But given that we were the functional leader in biggest tech agency or the most prominent tech agency for the Singapore government, we realized that the skills taxonomy that was available wasn't necessarily deep enough for us, and therefore we had to go develop. But when we were developing, it's not that we developed all by ourselves. We did take reference to the industry best practices. We worked with some consultants and brought it all in. But once we developed it, we broad-based it and we've expanded it within the public service. And then it could also be taken externally to private sector now. So, if you look at Singapore as an example, about 70 to 75% of our industry is small and medium enterprises. So they might not all be able to build this internally. So making it easily accessible to them is a great way of scaling this as well.
Yes.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why Skills Future did develop the taxonomy in the first place.
Yes. I mean, at some point we'll have a skills taxonomy that's more universal, but right now everyone's fragmented, and that really keeps adoption and some of the benefits from coming to the forefront.
I think that goes back to, what was upvoted earlier in the poll. It's absolutely important for us to be really agile with it. And again, one size doesn't fit all, and one model might not run for long. In fact, in the 5 years and a bit that I was there, we came a full cycle with our model. And as I left last year, I know we'd already started the second or third variant of it. So it won't be. None of these frameworks will have a lifetime membership in an organization.
They can't, especially when the job creation destruction is so rapid now. I think we're probably at the time of that. That was a letter for just the two of us chatting about things. But we'd like to open it up to any questions, any thoughts, any comments, anything you agreed with, disagreed with in terms of what we're talking about.
Maybe I could go. Oh, maybe I'm loud enough.
We can hear you. I don't know what you meant. Water.
I have instructions to use the mic. Okay. So one of the aspect, of course, with the geopolitical situation and things transitioning at a very fast pace, the cost of living in Singapore continues to rise. And probably it's been a discussion among many of the brands, probably within the room as well. When we go back, it's about cost management and optimization with the larger footprint that companies have, especially global companies, MNCs. With this aspect taken into consideration, with neighboring countries being able to offer resources at probably lower cost, how do you think this kind of has an impact on a longer term?
Okay, this is not a public sector view because I'm not even there anymore, right?
Probably open for.
Yes, I can share a couple of views, but would love to hear views from the room too. The short answer is depends. But a slightly longer answer is it really depends on what we are looking at. And, I'll give you an example from back in 2009 when, we were bringing together Google APAC as a region. For the first time in the history of Google, we had APAC as a region. And we were also building certain global hubs. We already had a hub in Mountain View and Dublin, and we wanted to create a hub in Asia. I was leading that charge and we did a location analysis. Eventually, we decided to set that up in Singapore. much against all conventional wisdom, even back then, not just now. And then that became a best practice in most of the APAC hubs for most functions, enabling functions, was set up in Singapore because it gave us scale. But most importantly, it gave us the talent that we needed to cover Singapore and global. The language that we needed, multi-language skills. And that wasn't easy in some of the other locations like KL and Philippines and Gurgaon and Pune and Bangalore that we were considering at that point in time. So it really depends on what are you leveraging for, what do you need to set up in Singapore, what can you move away, and then it varies from time to time. If I look now, 2025, over the last couple of years, a lot of what we set up in Singapore, Google has actively taken it to India and to Poland, and that's a shift in direction for them at this point. But that doesn't mean Singapore is strong. It has grown, but in different ways. Right? So it depends on the organization's need at a certain point in time of their maturity curve.
Yeah, I think it's been a tricky topic. Also, when I talk to some of the talent and the HR experts, especially working with global companies, the talent that we get over here, when you look at the region, is extremely strong. So be able to, try something new, try something innovative. It's always a strength, and also it's a very attractive place. One of the areas where we do struggle is, what next? How do we move talent? A lot of times when we are moving talent, once you bring them into a high-cost country, it's also getting a bit difficult to move them overseas. So that has been one of a discussion that I see in many of the HR platforms, especially with global companies. But yeah, thank you for sharing.
And if you look at another approach that Singapore has always taken, unlike a lot of countries where we saw the approach to nationalization is a given. We know what's happening in the US, and we know what happened in the UK with Brexit. Some significant immigration changes that happened in Australia a few years ago, I think 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And I've always, even before I joined the government, even when I was with Google, I was the point of contact for Google with Ministry of Manpower and what have you. I would always say that Singapore had a very balanced view to immigration. Even today, if you look at it, what we are saying really here is, so long as you can bring in talent that's not available here, the kind of leadership, senior talent, who can then come in and bring the skills that you need, but they're also contributing to developing our younger talent. So we're encouraging organizations to hire the younger talent locally and therefore grow the ecosystem as well. And that's a gap that happened, especially in technology, for a couple of decades. So we're correcting that, but we're not stopping talent from coming in. We're still very welcome. In fact, if you look at the tech.pass or OnePass, etc., it actually encourages some of the senior talent to come in, where they're bringing in more than just what they can bring for the company. They can shift or provide leadership for the ecosystem, and that some of those needs to continue. And then we also would like the organizations to consider some of those aspects as well when they are designing their workforce strategy, for example, in Singapore. Workforce strategy itself is going to dramatically shift. It's not just about people anymore. It's about people, robots, agents, everything that comes in. It's already coming in the conversation, gets more real as we go along.
Any other question?
I need recording.
I was just wondering if you could flesh out the idea a bit more about the AI and the augmentation versus replacement. Because to my mind, this isn't like the Industrial Revolution where we were sort of mechanizing human abilities. This is, to me, a complete place. And how that relates to recruitment.
Sure. There are a couple of thoughts from me. One is, and again, Marissa, Sid, and I were discussing about this session a couple of weeks ago, and we were all talking about it. Look at the market today, the talent market today. It's fair to say that the demand for strong employable talent, even till date, outstrips the supply that is in the market. So that's clear. The organizations, with all the challenges that we're seeing around us, we're also moving to a phase where we cannot continually grow, but we need to start scaling. Now, by that, I mean we need to start doing more with the same and more with less. It's because of the availability. So that brings it to two key shifts that we're seeing, or critical leadership challenges that we're seeing. One is, how do we use technology to build in the bandwidth that we need to be able to do more with the same manpower or with less manpower. The second one is, how are we utilizing, and again, we established earlier as well that there are some portions of the roles or some kind of jobs that are going away or that can be done using AI, that we have the manpower. Does it necessarily mean that we need to displace all of it? Can we use reskilling to make them part of the organization in a different way? That's really what I'm talking about, where it should be an augmentation play and should not be a displacement play.
The only thing I'd add to that is, if you want a little bedtime reading, the World Economic Forum has published a job creation destruction report. It's fascinating. There are 3 paths that they outline there. The first is that the robots rule the world. We don't need humans to work anymore. And then you get all those crazy theories about like basic universal income. Okay. Just by the way I phrase that, I do not think that's a likely path, but there are people that really do believe that that's going to happen. The second is that AI will destroy more jobs than it creates. And the repercussions for that, they basically summarize in saying it could be okay because the population is shrinking. And so actually we need less people to do the work. So the economic impact could be not as big as we could imagine now. And the third is actually that it creates more jobs, just like the internet did, just like any technological revolution. So I totally understand the agriculture industrial revolution. 1 in 4 Americans were working on a farm in 1900, and now that's less than 1 in 20. Doesn't mean that there are less jobs, there are just less farmers. So when we think about it, and that's, I think when we talk about that 10% of the jobs at your company, they're really amazing. If people get really great at that and know how to use AI for the rest of it, I would suggest you're in a better likelihood position of having job creation versus job destruction. Because I completely agree. There will be complete replacement of things. We will not have humans pushing a button or telling a robot go over there. That work will go away, but in its place, something else could pop up. So it's a fascinating report because there are no future facts. No one can stand up here and say, here's exactly what's happening, but it's a good logic train to say, here are the 3 paths it could probably go on, and here's why we believe it to be what it is.
There are, in preparation for this session, I was reading up last couple of days. I have a couple of examples that I want to share because something that is fascinating. One is from Deutsche Bank. They actually automated a lot of manual processes with AI, and instead of displacing or rather laying off its massive workforce, they retrained their employees in areas such as data analytics, cloud computing, and AI application. So essentially, their jobs weren't eliminated, but it was redesigned to be more strategic and more fulfilling. So that was one example that kind of really stood out for me. The other one was Telstra, closer home in Australia. So they used AI and automation to handle a significant portion of their customer service inquiries as well. But they used all the customer service officers to become digital coaches and tech support specialists to perform higher end roles. And then, the organization is growing. The demand will always be there. So instead of going out to the market, can we first look at reskilling our internal talent before we go to the market? So the equation and then the strategic workforce planning, like we were just sharing, shifts in the approach a little bit. Absolutely. I'd love to hear an alternate view because we're the only voices currently with you.
Well, I'm thinking more in relation to how it relates to recruitment in particular, because you tend to have large recruitment teams and offshore sourcing teams, and they are sourcing candidates through often online. Well, it's generally an online sourcing methodologies that they're using. And you'll be familiar with the unraveling of the Ariadne thread. The AI could do that so much quicker than a human in terms of looking at all the different avenues for all the different candidates and then assessing all of those candidates for all the different competencies and making an unbiased judgment in an instant, way, way faster than human can. to my mind, that is going to completely replace the whole resourcing, the mechanisms that we have, but as turned out within talent acquisition teams. Maybe not right now, but maybe within 5 years.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of discussion, not surprisingly, in our company about this, as we are all recruiters. So this is very pertinent to us. I think it's fascinating to think about. So right now we have many people, many processes, and many, so like the recruiters at the center. Then we have sources over here. They run their own work stream in a technology that's maybe not even integrated into the ATS. We have all these helpers helping move work around the recruiter, and it's messy right now. So yes, I think those bespoke tasks can be done much more quickly, but knitting that whole ecosystem together is still pretty far away. How I think it's going to change so much is right now we have to rely on the process to move work along. And that's actually not the way work works, but that's how it works now. We have a process in an ATS. And for me to give Jason some work, I have to do it in the way and put it in the process, and you take it out of the process, even though recruitment is not linear. It's not a process. When I think about this, is just totally my opinion. So I mean, I'm glad that we're recording so I can eat my words in 5 years. But when I think about it, like we were having this debate and we stopped it. We went to dinner. The next morning, I'm in my car, I call the colleagues that I'm with, and I said, does anyone need anything from Starbucks? And I texted some, I WhatsApped the international ones, I Teams, Molly, I think, and just said, does anyone need Starbucks? So I went through whatever channel I know they would answer. I went to Starbucks. I got the Starbucks. I brought it to work, and I got it to that in the office. I didn't follow a process flow. I know how to get to Starbucks. I know what to do when I'm there. I think the true revolution isn't going to be that the process is done better by the AI. It's the fact that you don't need a process anymore because life actually isn't a process. So when the agents start to really do work in a way that is disorganized and nonlinear, it will challenge, what's left for the human to do it? If I don't need to write a process map for someone to source and it just knows how to find it, it knows how to make all those decisions and put it together, that will be a new world. Now, realistically, the AI we see, it's not smart enough to talk to the other agents. So we have like the recruiter at the center. In the next 5 years, I would say pretty reasonable to see a recruiter at the center and agents that not only take the human work, but also those subscale technologies that don't need to exist and the weird, messy process. And you have people helping a recruiter. But I still think the process is too nonlinear for it to be run by someone who doesn't know how it all fits together. You're going to still have helpers for a period of time, but there's going to have to be someone at the center to make it work and get that last mile. I think that's why everyone's still obsessed when we go to sell models. They want to know how many recruiters you have in the model. Because again, at the end of the day, it's great if you have talent intelligence, but they're not filling the roles. And until you get some of the technical background where the agents can talk to the agents in a really compelling way, I think that'll be the big unlock. And that seems like it's going to be here quickly. But then I think about how big your companies are and how they don't even want to use ChatGPT, or there's such a hesitancy to doing it. I think, again, it'll be like a big build, and then it'll change the way we work, but not for a while yet. That's how I think about it. But again, we're recording, and so maybe we'll put a $20 bill down, and you can tell me if you believe or not.
Couple of quick thoughts, and then two examples from something that I've heard very recently. Just to say that it's evolving. When we're talking about a 5-year horizon, I'm definitely with you. We don't know what would happen, primarily because, one, the pace at which AI is progressing, and two, the half-life of technology itself, half-life skills, technology itself is less than 18 months today. So are we here, really predicting the future? We don't know. That it makes it all the more important. Now I can see the 30% upvote on the question. Unless we are agile in the way we are approaching as the changes happen, we will be left behind. So that's one thing. The second one is the key to what Marissa just said was there will be agents and everybody assisting the people. I still think it's going to be a great enabler. It'll be, I see it more as a human AI collaboration rather than just AI doing something. Third one, and which is more real time, two examples. I think I just read 2 days ago that Google had started looking at AI interviews and they have scrapped it and they have brought back the people into interviewing. So that's one thing. So which means that it's not ready yet to completely replace. The second one, again, the organization shall not be named. I was talking to some industry friends and they said that they did let go of a few thousands of staff in the staffing organization globally, at only to be quickly replaced by equal numbers from RPOs. So that's good news for us. Yeah.
I didn't tell you to say that, but thank you.
Yeah, the organization shall not be named, but yeah, we're also seeing that happen.
But I think that's really, your question's the right one, because we have to think about the work that's going to be left. It probably won't be sourcing the way we do. It'll be teaching agents how to source, or teaching agents how to get better at it, or plugging agents into each other, or it'll be thinking about a different part of the employee life cycle we have to care about a lot more that we either don't have time for now or isn't relevant. So I think that is the conversation that seems to be the most relevant, is how do you just think about the next best thing and don't do anything that you can't get yourself out of if you're planning for the future. The half-life of AI is actually shocking. If you think about 2 years ago, we were sitting here and we would show the graphics of like, AI is not going to take over your job because the images it produced had like a person with 5 eyes and, earrings that were floating over here. And now that picture you saw of me it's not a real picture. It's AI and it's good enough to use. So I don't know. We'll see. But it's as long as we don't try to make what we do today a little bit better and think about it's going to be totally different, just a matter of time.
We've got two questions. Great to see the room warming up, but then we'll have to move on to the next.
Right. I thought I would just chime in here because I stand in the world of GovTech and Cielo. So NCS actually does a fair bit of local hiring for GovTech. Right. So out of the 2,500 people that we hire in Singapore, 600 are actually interns and the rest of them are experienced hire. And with GovTech, we work a lot of roles together. Yeah. And a lot of the roles are actually reserved for Singaporean and Singapore because they are really tech-driven and, confidential positions. So what happened is we have a lot of applicants. So one of the positions that recently we have received for a software developer, we had nearly 2,000 applicants. That is something that a TA ops will not have time to eyeball so many resumes. So I think actually AI brings efficiency and also fairness to the whole process because everyone's CV now gets screened, but with technology. So in fact, when we bring this up to our senior management, they were very supportive to bring in AI. And we are also working currently with the government to make sure that with IMDA, we're actually going to train up the rest of our 13,000 people to be AI skilled. Why are we doing so? This, for example, in China, from 6 years old, they are going to be exposed to AI in school. So this is something that we will not run away from. And actually, my leaders have given me not 5 years, by the way. They told us that by the next 1 to 2 years, we should be fully automated to make sure that we are more efficient, we are fairer in the whole process. So that's the reason why I think we're partnering heavily with Cielo on technology and not just the human resources that is there on the spot to do it. Currently, we're also developing something slightly different from what Cielo is going because Cielo is only taking a part of our hiring process. We are also looking at how we are screening the people that are showing up for interviews. Because other than remote interviews, recently we have a few cases. The person that turned out for the interview were assisted by someone. And then we also have flagging out from the clients that actually the one that went for the interview wasn't the one that showed up for the job. So we had two challenges.
As you would hope.
Yes. Not in Singapore. They're outside of Singapore, even in the countries, but 2 different countries. We already have situation like this. So we're looking at how the AI solution will help us to map the features, right? And also if, let's say, there's tension in the interview, etc. Yeah. So I think what we'll do is, for example, with Ministry of Manpower, this is something that I can really, share openly. The call center sits with NCS. So if today you're to call Ministry of Manpower and then the lady picked up and say, hi, it's actually sitting in NCS facilities. We are offering 3 solutions: the human resources to government. Second, the technology. In the past, they would take note of your questions, and then they will think about who to refer. And then they put you on 3 to 5 minutes on hold because they were running around looking for who has the answer. So with AI, what we did was they're able to pull out the answer from the recording immediately right in front of the screen of the person that's taking your call. The operator can give you the right answer. And all these are recorded at your permission. So this is how AI has improved our day-to-day solutions to our client as well. Yep. So giving back, part of Singapore government, we are doing really good job to support the people, and we are very mindful that we are putting the employment first and also taking care of the future younger generation. Thank you.
I think we've got one last, and then we have to drop to analyst question.
Hello. Actually, my take or my understanding is completely different than what we have discussed so far and how automation would really work. In my kind of industry, automation is a supporting system. Then leading system is just because, you can ask AI to source the screen profiles for you to give you the right fit. But the human intelligence can never be replaced. Is what I strongly believe in. Is a person, especially in recruitment, right? As a candidate is shortlisted, selected, offered, AI will not detect whether the person will join or not, but a human intelligence will definitely have clues that can help you map what's there in the future. In the sense, whether we need to have, different, 2-3 more people to see and have that, course going. How do we, let the business know? Because business continuity is also one of the most critical area, right? We need to have a continued business. We cannot rely on somebody who's, assumed to join, right? So in my kind of industry, I think human intelligence plays the highest role. I'll give an example. We implemented an AI tool for engagement. And this is an AI tool because HR VP, HR business partners cannot go to each and every individual in the organization and ask, how are you feeling today? You completed 6 months in the organization, you completed 1 year, you completed 2 years. What is the challenge that you're facing? How is your manager treating you? And so forth. So we implemented a tool. Now, that doesn't give, a bandwidth for us to replace the role or replace engagement with that tool. But that tool gives us significant survey results and understanding how a 6 months individual will feel in an organization, how a 12-year-old person feels in an organization in based on the tenure. And then the AI assists the HR team. What questions would you ask to retain this kind of individual? What kind of questions can you leverage to probably get through? Now, out of your 2,000 odd employees, not all 2,000 will be in the red zone in the high-risk area. So it gives you a platform where you can segregate and you can focus to build in that kind of engagement and workforce within the organization. So for me, in my organization or my industry, probably because I'm not from IT, for me, the human intelligence plays a highest part because at the end of the day, when the person joins within trust to the person whom he or she has spoken to, right, over the call. So AI, I don't know whether will replace emotion quotient, but that's also something that we need to consider when it comes to human intelligence. Yeah.
When we implemented the jet lag. Probably should have some more coffee. When we implemented automated interview scheduling and an engagement model that was 100% automated, it was way more efficient. It actually worked really well to get people scheduled for an interview, screened, and then scheduled for a hiring manager interview. What it didn't work for is getting people to the hiring manager interview. Because when they spoke to a machine, there's no one to disappoint. It's not that the process didn't go well. We actually had to reintroduce a 15-minute call with a human. So they had some sort of personal obligation to show up to. So it's those kind of use cases we'll learn where, the human touch really needs to be there. And for now, the technology and a lot of what we're doing still needs the human at the center. And we still believe that human-centric programs are the way forward because humans want to work for humans. And also that AI is going to create a huge mess before it's helpful. If you think about being able to apply for 100 jobs with one click, and then you have bots scheduling or bots screening AI-generated resumes, like we're going to have a bit of a mess before it's the promised land on the back end. And so keeping a human in the loop is really important to protect your brand right now, we think.
Right. Well, this was a really insightful discussion. Thank you so much, TMP and Marissa. Can we all at least put our hands together? Thank you. Thanks for being best.